Hey guys, J.Anthony here. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you all for the continued support. I really appreciate it. A lot of you guys have been giving me some great feedback, some great comments, some great questions, and subscribers keep going up, so thank you. I really appreciate all the support I'm getting. A couple questions I'm going to be addressing on this video. We're going to talk about watch winders. We're going to talk about, I guess, kind of independent watchmakers such as F.P. Journe and Parmesan de Fleurier. And then we're also going to get a little bit into what kind of watches should someone younger in age be considering purchasing. So first question we'll talk about is watch winders. This is something I have been asked occasionally, and I'll kind of give you my 2 cents on this. Again, this is my opinion, one of 7 billion, so feel free to look around and get a different perspective. But this is kind of my thought on watch winders. So watch winders to me are definitely not a necessity. To me, they're something that, if anything, they offer a little bit of convenience, but personally, I would never spend my money on one. I'll kind of give you a sense of why. So for those of you that honestly don't know what a watch winder is a device that basically oscillates back and forth, and it's something that you would use if you have an automatic watch. So as you would hopefully be aware of, if you have an automatic watch, there's a rotor that oscillates back and forth with wrist movement. And after a while, if you don't wear the watch, most watches typically will last about 40 to 72 hours on a power reserve. The watch will stop ticking. So if you leave your watch sitting for a couple days, you're going to pick it back up and you're going to have to reset it because it stopped ticking. Because again, the rotor is not keeping the movement wound. Well, what a watch winder does is it basically will mimic your wrist movement, and it will keep the watch wound. So if you have an automatic watch, or you can actually get watch winders that actually will hold several watches. I think I've seen up to like 12 actually. It's pretty crazy. And you can get them in all sorts of funny colors and like exotic woods, and you can make them as fancy as you're willing to spend money for them. But basically this offers the convenience of, if you want to take your watch off and leave it for a week or two or what have you, you'll come back and your watch will still be wound. And the reason that I don't think that that's particularly necessary is, well, I guess a couple reasons. So in my life, I don't typically take my watches off for that long. And when I do, it's something that it doesn't take me all that long to get them set up. The only time that I think a watch winder ever would have become convenient for me is there have been 2 periods where I was flipping back and forth between watches every couple days. There was a time that I was rotating between my Rolex Submariner, my Rolex Datejust, and my Omega Speedmaster, for example. And there was a time where I was going back and forth between my Rolex President and my Rolex Daytona. But again, why am I saying these aren't really relevant or necessary? Well, a couple things. One of the arguments is from people that I get quite a bit is you want a watch winder because it keeps the watch running and keeps all the parts lubricated, and again, you don't want a watch sitting for a very long period of time unless it's running, is the argument that I've been told. I disagree with that as long as it's a reasonable period of time. A watch is a mechanical device very similar to a car, and that if you leave it sitting for a few days or even a few weeks, it's not going to hurt it at all. If it's something that you're really not going to be wearing that often anyway, I guess my question to you would be, why do you have it in the first place? Beyond that, to me, if you have your watch constantly running, you're putting constant wear on your watch. So we talk about service intervals on watches, and with Rolexes they say about every 5 years or so you want to get it serviced. If you literally never let your watch stop and you have it constantly wound for 5 years, imagine how much extra wear you're putting on that watch. And I think, if anything, it's probably to your benefit to let the watch stop ticking and let it rest for a couple days or so, because again, you're lessening the load of wear you're putting on the watch. And again, there's people that say, well, if you don't wear it that often and you let it sit, then you're letting the lubricants inside the movement, they're drying up and you're causing damage to the watch. Yes, but no. If you're leaving the watch sit for several months at a time, I could say over time that might be a little detrimental to the movement. I mean, to me, the only time you're really going to have to be worried about putting any kind of excess wear on the movement from letting it rest, I'd say, is like really long-term storage, like if you're throwing something into a safe for a year or two. And if that's really what you're doing with your watches, I guess the first question you have to ask yourself is, why do you have the watch in the first place? And if it's because it's really rare or it's special or something to that effect, if anything, I would just recommend you wear it more often, because leaving it sitting in a safe versus leaving it on a watch winder 24/7, either way, you're not really doing your watch any favors. So my recommendation would be, unless you just really can't be bothered to set your watches up. I guess I give one caveat to this too. There's probably one watch that I've owned that I probably would have bought a watch winder for, and that was my Rolex President. And the reason with that watch is it literally took me 10 minutes to reset the thing. It was an older model President, and you had to cycle through all the days, and it was a big pain. But let's be honest, most new watches don't take that long to set. So my recommendation would be is you don't get a watch winder, save your money, and spend it on something else. Buy yourself a nice alligator strap for your watch or whatever else. But I think that money is better spent other places, or save it and you can use it to pay for maintenance every couple of years. You know, again, it's not a big deal to set the watch up, you know, after it stops running. Again, leaving it on a watch winder, you're constantly putting the watch in a wear state, versus letting it rest for a while. It's going to lessen the wear you're actually putting on the watch. And again, I mean, it's the only real value that I see in watch winders is that it's a convenience factor. You know, so if you have a bunch of watches and you're constantly going back and forth and you just can't be bothered to constantly be resetting watches, then, you know, I guess a watch winder makes sense in that case. In my case, I probably rotate between 7 or 8 watches, and I'm not that bothered to take 30 seconds to reset a watch. And I kind of rotate them every couple of weeks, so I'm keeping them, they sit for a while, but at the same point, at least once a month, every single one of them gets wound and is used at some point typically. So that'd be my recommendation. I don't know that watch winders are really a necessity. Again, I personally think that if anything, they're detrimental, because you're keeping the watch constantly running and it's in a constant wear state. You know, it's, imagine just idling your car 24/7. Wouldn't it be better if you let it kind of sit for a while and rest, and then start it up again later, versus leaving the thing constantly running? You know, again, feel free to tell me what you think below, but that's kind of my thought. And again, unless you either like the convenience of it or you just like the idea of it too. There's some very fancy cases out there. You can get them again in very exotic wood. So if you want them for a presentation perspective, just to show off your collection, I mean, again, that's a personal thing. Another question that I got asked was, what do I think about F. Vacheron? For those of you that aren't familiar, F. Vacheron is an independent watchmaker that actually has his own brand. Long story short, I think incredible timepieces come from F. Vacheron. In-house movements, quality and execution is phenomenal. F. Vacheron is very similar to some other ones out there, such as Orient Fleurier, and there's actually quite a few other ones out there. There's, I'd say, probably about a good 10 or 12 independent watchmakers that have some notoriety to them. And again, these were highly skilled watch craftsmen that ended up going into their own brand. So what do I think about them? Some of this is coming from my perspective. So I have an inherent bias of, I'm cheap, I guess is the way that I'd put this. And what I mean by cheap is not that I'm not averse to spending a lot of money on a watch. Clearly, if you've watched my videos, I have no issue spending a lot of money on a watch. But I'm always constantly concerned about what happens the day I have to go sell it. So every watch that I've bought, I've always bought watches that I didn't think would hold their value pretty well, might appreciate a little bit, or if they depreciated, which, you know, let's be honest, they can as well, what watches am I going to take the lowest hit on depreciation? So I've stayed to tried and true brands that have large recognition, both inside and outside the watch community, because again, when I spend money, I want to know how much I'm going to be able to get in on the back end of it if I ever decide to sell the piece on. So I haven't really looked at these watchmakers per se from that value, and the reason being is their resale is kind of all over the place. Horologically speaking, they're incredibly well made pieces, and if you just appreciate the fine art of watchmaking, and if you're not really, you know, cheap like I am, and you're not concerned about the selling them on, and you know, this is going to be like a lifetime purchase piece for you, or something to cherish for a lifetime, or if you're not really concerned about the depreciation factor, this is the purest expression of watchmaking. So if you have that kind of a mindset and you want something representative of the watchmaking art, you're not really concerned with the status and what other people see on your wrist and get excited about. You want something that was, you know, given birth by a wonderful creative watch genius that spent a lot of time and effort creating their vision, and it's horologically significant in terms of it being completely in-house, and it's kind of a clean sheet design, and it's kind of like watchmaking in its purest sense, then this is the way to go. Again, I've stayed away from them because to me the market on the resale side is all over the place. You know, I've seen some pieces by like Parmesan and Fleurier. Some of their watches hold their value pretty well. Other ones, they don't seem to sell particularly well on the secondhand market. I haven't really followed F. Vacheron to see how their prices go, but we're talking pieces in the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars and beyond. And so to me, these being watches that they don't have the same recognition of a more common mainstream brand, say as like a Patek Philippe, you're taking a big risk that the depreciation is going to be significant. because there's just unfortunately aren't a lot of people that are aware of these brands outside of the watch community, so they don't have that recognition, and therefore resale is going to be a sketchier business. That's not to say that that may change. Over time, these things being what they are, is that they get more recognition, and as they become more known, we may actually see that these pieces end up appreciating in value, and over time they can end up being terrific investments. Again, so that's why I haven't really, gone into them. I'm not really sure where their long-term market's going to be on resale, and I'll be honest, as soon as I see any sort of a reason to think that these things are going to be, have the same resale ability as like a Rolex or a Patek, or it might even have an appreciation ability to them, I would seriously give them a look. And again, if you're not cheap like me, or if I'm being nice frugal, there's really no reason why you should look at these guys if you're coming at this as, what can I get that's kind of a pure watchmaking traditional piece. This is somebody's vision. They created this kind of one-off bespoke design. I talked about in another video MB and F. Again, that's MB and F. They do some really cool off-the-wall unique designs. Again, these watches aren't for people that are really into status, because you're not going to find a lot of people that are going to recognize them or get excited about them. This is for the kind of person that, again, isn't really worried about the investment potential of it. They're more concerned with buying a pure form of horological tradition. This is, again, the way to go. And these things they're works of art. They really are. And these things should be in museums someday, because they're just incredible representations of someone's creative dream. And I really think it's wonderful we have these kind of businesses around, and I really hope that this kind of thing grows. And I would hope too that as we get into 3D printing and all these other technologies as we're emerging in the world, that maybe this will give birth to younger generations getting into this as well. And maybe there could be a way that people my age and younger could create their own watches from home, having, again, 3D printing abilities and other sort of milling abilities, where everybody could almost kind of create their own bespoke designs. I think that'd be really cool. To have some sort of like affordable, unique bespoke design watchmaking in our future, I think would just be incredible. So I'd love to see the market go that way. Time will tell. Another question that I get asked, and this will be the last question, are, do I think Rolexes are for older people, namely, again, people not young? That's a really weird way to put that. So, and if I do think so, what kind of watches would I recommend to younger folks interested in watches, and high-end watches, I assume in particular? This is a weird question to ask me, because while I am 27 years old, I tend to have pretty eclectic taste. So, I just bear in mind that my inherent bias is, while I may be 27 years old, I've owned many watches and cars and things that most people my age typically wouldn't be interested in. Again, if you watch my channel, one of my cars I drive daily is a Lexus LS. If we did demographics, I'm sure the average age of an owner of a Lexus LS is probably late 50s, early 60s. So I'm not really the typical 27-year-old on that front. And watchmaking is no different. I've owned Datejust and Presidents, and outside of, I guess, well, the President, outside of like the rapping community, there aren't a lot of guys in their 20s that could afford those kind of watches that would really be interested in that kind of a style, because it's very much kind of an old man kind of image. I think of a Rolex President, I think of an old man smoking a cigar, drinking brandy, and wearing his Rolex President. I don't think of a 20-year-old wearing a Rolex President. That said, I do think Rolex Sport models are pretty good and versatile watches for younger men and women as well. I think the Rolex Daytona, I think that doesn't really speak to an age group. I think you can wear one in your 20s quite well. I think men and women, it's a 40 mil piece. I think that's a great piece for man or woman, and I don't think age is really a factor there. I think all the Rolex Sport line models, I think the Explorer is actually a pretty youthful piece. The Explorer and the Milgauss movement, or watches, and the Rolex Deep Sea and the Submariners. Those to me don't say old men. Again, I have some bias. I think you can pull those off at any age. I think those are just classic and timeless, and it doesn't really speak to a particular age set. When you get into pizzas like the Datejust and the President, I think those are a little more traditional, and I think you typically would assume those are owned by people older in years. As for watches that I really think the young people tend to kind of gravitate to, and I think kind of speak to a younger audience, we've talked about this before. I think Panerai is definitely very much geared towards a younger audience, although the age spectrum of people that buy Panerai is quite large. I'd see 20-year-olds wearing Panerais quite a bit. Bell & Ross, I'm not a huge fan of their movements. They use generic ETA movements last I checked, but I think Bell & Ross watches are pretty cool. If you haven't looked them up and you like airplanes, take a look at them. They look like avionics instruments. They're pretty cool. You can definitely be in your 20s and pull one of those off. I've known a lot of people younger that wore those. I think Omega does some pretty nice younger watches. Constellation and some of those aside, I think like the Planet Ocean line, I think is definitely a youthful looking watch. I think the Speedmaster tends to be a little bit of an older mindset and demographic, but I think you can definitely pull off a Speedmaster if you're younger. There's a bunch of other options out there. A lot of people my age I see wearing Tag Heuers. If you've watched my other videos, you know that I'm not a big fan of Tag Heuers. But again, youthful wise, I see a lot of guys my age wearing the Tag Heuer F1 series. I personally don't like those watches in the slightest, but again, a lot of people my age wear those watches. So what would I recommend? If you're concerned with image about being youthful, I think Panerai is probably the best balance. I think Panerai makes a great watch, and I think you can pull it off in your 20s as much as you can pull it off in your 50s. I think Rolex Sportline watches, I think, are great watches. You can buy a Submariner in your 20s, and I think you'll still be enjoying wearing it in your 50s and 60s. I think it's timeless. Rolex Explorers, the Explorer 2s, the Milgauss, again, those to me don't have any real age demographics associated with them. I think you can be any age and pull those off. Probably not going to want to be wearing a Datejust daily in your 20s. I like them, but again, I'm not the typical 20-something-year-old. I have very eclectic taste, and I don't really care what people think about what I purchase. So if you want something youthful, you're probably not going to be wanting to buy a Datejust. And again, Omega, they make some really cool watches. I like Breitling a lot too. Breitling, I've noticed, tends to be older men that tend to wear Breitlings. I'd say 30s and beyond, with the exception of maybe the Super Ocean and the Emergency or the B1 series. The Chronomats and the Colts and the Navatimers tend to be an older generation, I've noticed, for the most part. Again, so this is all kind of a personal taste thing. That's just kind of where all that goes. So, my recommendation is this, and I've had people ask me this in other videos as well. I wouldn't let your decisions be influenced by other people and how you think you're going to be perceived. I think you should buy what you like. And it's like, I've been very fortunate that I can, drive the kind of cars that I want to drive, and I can have the kind of watches that I want to drive. And, as people that watch my channel have seen, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm always buying the most expensive or the most popular things out there on the market. I buy what I like. Do I want a new Mercedes S-Class, or do I want an older Lexus LS? Well, I like the older Lexus LS. I don't care what it says about me, it's just what I like, right? I bought a Rolex Datejust. I like the Rolex Datejust. Could I have had a Panerai for the same price as my Datejust when the Panerai made me look younger? Sure. I like the Datejust. I enjoyed my Datejust. So I would really caution people from buying or purchasing items because they're worried about the connotation and how it's going to say to people. If you buy something because you want people to see that you're wealthy, or because you want it to say something about you being trendy, or that any of those things, to me, the only reason you should be buying anything is because you enjoy it and because it speaks to you. And I think if you buy something for any other reason, again, because you're worried about the connotation it gives to other people, I think the second you buy it, you're going to regret it, and it's not going to be a good purchase for you. So buy what you like, and don't worry about what other people think, And I think a lot of people get so into the mindset of how much things cost and what, if they're trendy or not, and what people think about them, that I don't think they really appreciate things for what value they really have and how they really make you feel. And to me, it should all be about how something makes you feel. There was a comment on one of my videos, a guy was mentioning that he had an old 1998 Supra. And it's like, me being a car guy, it's like if I could have a brand new Nissan Skyline GTR or a brand new, Porsche 911 Turbo S, or I could have a 1998 2JZ GTE Supra right-hand drive with a 6-speed manual, I want the Supra. Or if I could have an R32 Skyline versus, I don't know, you name it, a brand new Jaguar F-Type, I'd rather have the old Skyline. That's just my taste, and those appeal to me. And I know if I bought those, I'd be happy, and if I bought other cars, I'd be buying them for the wrong reasons, and they wouldn't be fulfilling to me. So find out what you like, get out there, think outside the box, don't feel pressure to buy something because it's what you think could be expected of you to buy, and just follow your heart and do what you think makes sense for you. So thank you all for the continued support. Really, really appreciate it. I'm almost up to 1,500 subscribers now, so that's incredible. It's like 500 since I did my 1,000 subscribers post. Thank you all for the support. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you thought it sucked, please tell me down below why. And questions and comments are much appreciated to keep the content flowing. So thank you so much, and have a great afternoon, or a great day, or a great evening, or wherever you are. Have a good day. Thanks.